Salut survivors! Welcome back to SolutOdka channel in Manor Lords guide series. When building a settler's camp, I have often picked the modest camp, assuming the average one is not really worth it. But then today, I decided to do a more in-depth study. And the question of this study is, when is it worth it to pay for an average camp? As you can see here, the difference between the modest and average is really straightforward. One costs you 250 coins from your treasury, the other one costs you the double, 500, and all the resources you get are the double. Now, it's not fully complete what is displayed here between modest and average, because in addition of the 20 bread, 20 firewood, 20 stones, and 10 tools in a modest, you will also have 8 logs and 50 coins in cash in the region, in the regional wealth. And in average, it's a double. So you get 40 of everything, right? I mean, of bread, firewood, stones, and 20 tools. And then you get double of 8, so it's 16 logs, as well as 100 regional wealth. So you have double bread, double firewood, double everything. So the big question is, what is the impact of that? So, one by one, let's go through it. When we look at the food, basically we have 20 breads more in the average. So the question is, what is 20 bread? Well, at the end of the day, since you are starting with 5 families and families are using 1 food per month, the 20 breads for 5 families is equivalent to 4 months of food. That's a simple way to look at it. So basically, if you take average instead of modest, you have 4 months of food for 5 families. The other thing to look at is that when you will have multiple type of food, you will get an approval buff, right? If you have 40 breads instead of 20 breads, you will have a longer approval buff to get meat plus bread, followed by berries plus bread. Now, when you look at the firewood, okay, you get 40 firewood instead of 20 firewood. Well, to be honest, I think firewood can be produced relatively fast, and this is a bit trivial and doesn't have really a big impact. Okay, yes, you have 40 instead of 20, but anyway, if you've watched my Great Pyramid build order, actually, in that Great Pyramid build order, I'm building the woodcutter after I build the church with only 20 firewood. So if you have 40 firewood, you can do it even later. But, I mean, it's already late after a church. So say the 40 firewood instead of 20 is not really meaningful. So, the stones, when you start with 20 stones, it's relatively perfect because it's giving you 10 stones for your granary right away, or very quickly, followed by 10 stones for your church, the simple wood church, the basic church level 1. Now, if you have 40 stones, you could consider that you get 20 stones more, that it's good for a church upgrade. The church level 2 upgrade costs 20 stones. However, it doesn't work this way because in order to build a church, you will need roof tiles, and in order to get roof tiles, you will need a clay furnace, and that clay furnace costs 5 stones. So because of the 5 stones for the clay furnace, you would need 45 stones and not 40, meaning that you need to build a stone cutter camp, collect stones, and bring it back. So the 40 stones is not extremely useful when you think about the church, but if you want to rush to get a manor, then it can happen to be useful. The tools right now are not really implemented in the game, so 0 tools, 10 tools, 20 tools, in my opinion, it doesn't matter. The regional wealth, as mentioned, in the modest case you get 50, while in the average case you get 100. Now, I'm not sure how you spend your 50 in the modest, but for me the 50, it's systematic to get first 1 veggie burgage plot expansion, 1 ox, that's already using 35 out of 50, and typically the last 15 I use for a second veggie garden when I'm rapidly expanding my new village. So if you have 100 instead of 50, this is interesting because it's not easy to get these 50 coins extra. If you want to sell 50 firewood, you can sell 50 firewood to get 50 coins, but you're not guaranteed to sell your 50. Maybe you sell 10 and then 10 and 10 again. So actually it is really worth it, this extra 50. Now this extra 50 could be utilized to buy a trade route, for example, for a major trade route at the trading post. Or it could also be useful to invest into 2 chicken coop early in the game, early in the development of your hamlet, I mean. And these 2 chicken coop will represent 4 eggs per month. And when we look at the beginning of the village, that is considered worth it. But then there is one difference we have not yet tackled yet. This is a difference that appears trivial at first, but then in essence is not. Is that basically in the modest case, you start with 8 logs. And in the average case, you start with 16 logs. Now, if you start with 8 logs only, you need to rapidly build a logging camp, or you will run out of logs. However, in the average case, you can build a granary and build housing for 5 families, and then and only then build a logging camp. Therefore, there is an advantage in terms of logs in the average, is that basically you can build all your housing on the first month, meaning it has actually a pretty big impact. It means that since you're able to build your 5 families housing right off the bat, just after the granary, very likely, then it means you will have no or a very small or no negative approval due to homelessness of your families. And this has an impact, as we will see a bit later. So, in World Brand, I did the 2 cases, one modest and one average. So, as a result of these 2, in the 2 cases, I started at the same time. I started in March. In the modest scenario, I utilized the Great Pyramid build order, and in the average scenario, I did not. I adjusted because of the different resources you start with and optimize from there. It's actually a very interesting build order. I might be doing another video on that, how to say, fast growth build order. So, if you compare the 2, both have started in March. How do we compare? We can start to look at which month is it that I started to have 1 new family to join. So basically, in the modest case, I got the first family to join in June, which means 3 months after March. While in the average case, thanks to starting with more logs, I was able to get +1 family in May instead of June, which is 2 months after colonizing and not 3 months. Then the next indicator that I noted is when is it that I have been able to build the church level 2. Because 2 months, more or less 2 months after having a church level 2, then you can start to get 2 families per month to join your settlement. So basically, in a sense, in the modest case, I was able to build the church level 2 in August, and in the average case, I built it 2 months earlier, in June. And then after that, everything else is more or less the same. So to summarize between these 2 different scenarios, in the modest case, I colonized in March, I started to get +1 family per month in June, and I built the church level 2 in August, meaning that I will have +2 families per month in October. In the average case, I got my colonization in March, of course. I got my +1 population or +1 family per month in May. Built the church level 2 in June, which will translate in starting to have +2 families per month in August. So, as a result of this comparison, basically what it means when you invest into the average settlers camp compared to the modest settlers camp is that you will have 2 months earlier your population. Meaning at any point in time, say when you will have 12 population if you started in modest, if you had started in average, you would have 16 population, and so on and so forth. So you have 2 months ahead of time when you look at it in terms of population recruited. So the big question translates now, is it worth it for you to pay 250 extra treasury coins in order to have your settlement 2 months ahead? It's only up to you to say if it's worth it or not. I'm not going to tell you that. But what I can tell you is when or how do I think it is useful to be 2 months ahead. So, I think if you are trying to raise to get very quickly your militias, then it is interesting. Because the whole time when you get 4 families extra, you harvest more resources, of course. And because of having four families, you get 8 men who can fight for you, right? So, I mean, for you and for their village, of course. Anyway, that's one key thing. Is then you will always have +4 people, meaning +4 families, meaning +8 people. Okay. Then the other cases that it can be interesting. One is the fact that you will build a church level 2 faster. Hence, you will earn influence faster. Therefore, you could consider to utilize the advantage of the average settlers camp versus the modest settlers camp, because you will build the church level 2 faster, you will earn therefore influence faster, and you will colonize or claim your region faster. Another case where this can happen to be useful, if you're colonizing late summer, early autumn, then you have a risk to run out of food during the winter, right? You're colonizing close to winter. Now, if you're colonizing close to winter, to start with more bread, more logs, more firewoods, develop yourself faster, it is interesting and it is useful so that you will be better ready for winter. Now, I think I have covered here the in-depth analysis. Is it worth it? Or when is it worth it to pay for an average camp compared to a modest camp? Please let me know in the comments if you have a different opinion or if you think there are some parameters in this study that are incomplete in your opinion. I'll be very happy to hear all about it. On that note, let's toast to the like and subscribe buttons. I appreciate very much the support. Thank you for watching and see you in my next videos. Cheers.